Germany and the Soviet Union briefly allied in a war against Poland. This war started the Second World War, but while France and Britain swore to defend Poland, they only declared war on Germany, not on the Soviet Union. But what if Germany never contacted the Soviet Union and just invaded Poland alone? You may be quick to shrug this off and say that nothing drastic would happen, but you would be wrong. The Soviet Union did claim eastern parts of Poland, and in this alternate history, Germany would annex them, thus creating a diplomatic incident. The Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact historically solved that issue, as it partitioned Eastern Europe into spheres of influence, just so future conflicts could be avoided. Getting rid of this important pact would mean war between Germany and the Soviet Union in late 1939 or early 1940. This is why the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact was so important, and forcing Germany and the Soviet Union not to sign this would be tricky. But what if that were to happen? Who would come out on top in the Second World War? Let me answer that question. I'm not so sure how this pact is even possible. One way to prevent its signature is for both countries to disagree on the borders, making it formally agreeing to impossible. Germany could claim a bit more, which would upset the Soviet Union. This would be going back and forth. Another way to achieve this is to get rid of the Austrian painter, which doesn't automatically get rid of his ruling party, as he would get replaced by Rudolf Hess or Heinrich Himmler. If that were to happen, the scenario becomes a bit difficult to predict, as we cannot use the characteristics of the Austrian painter to predict what would happen next. The Soviet Union declining the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact is also not feasible. Stalin had purged a large portion of his army officers, so he needed peace for the time being. Even if Germany didn't initiate the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, maybe the Soviet Union would have in this alternate timeline. The Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact wasn't just a pact of splitting Eastern Europe, it was also a pact of non-aggression for 10 years. Maybe the German Führer, out of ideological reasons, decided he doesn't need the non-aggression pact. This I think is the most possible outcome, as he believed that the war against the Soviet Union is going to take only a couple of months. As a result, the Germans wouldn't partition Eastern Europe with the Soviet Union, but would just act on their war against Poland alone. I want to show you a couple of coins that were used in Germany, Poland and the Soviet Union at the time of the Second World War. I have these German coins from 1940 and 1942. They were made from zinc, which is a really cheap metal, hence the poor quality of these coins. You can assume that all the expensive metals went towards building tanks, not coins. As for the Soviet Union, they had this silver coin from 1922, and it's 50% silver. This coin was used during the Russian Civil War. As a result, on the back it doesn't say that it's from the Soviet Union, but it's from the Russian Soviet Federative Socialist Republic. As for Poland, this coin is from 1923, and it's among the first ones ever produced in Poland. It's nothing special, but 150 million of them were produced, so despite it being 100 years old, it's not that rare. Now, back to the video. Now that I have told you how the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact wouldn't be signed, I want to point out that the start of the Second World War would be a bit delayed. This is because Germany would have to account for actually invading all of Poland this time, which didn't happen historically, as due to the pact the Soviet Union also invaded from the east. Perhaps the war is delayed by a couple of months, which is a detail that wouldn't matter in the grand scheme of things. When Germany would invade Poland, perhaps very late 1939 or early 1940, France and Britain would join the war against Germany. Historically, the Soviet Union joined 2 weeks after Germany had invaded, so for the first 2 weeks of the conflict, there isn't going to be anything that would happen differently. This is with a huge exception that the Soviet Union would be shocked that Germany is attacking their neighbor. As I said earlier, the Soviet Union might have initiated for a non-aggression pact, as they weren't ready for a war. If the Germans decide to accept this non-aggression pact, we would just get the historical scenario, with the same outcome. Even if you argue that Germany accepting right here is the most realistic outcome, I'll tell you that this would make for a really boring video, as we all know what would happen after that. This is because Germany is likely to accept the Soviet deal to partition Eastern Europe in that situation, as the Austrian painter didn't expect to be at war with France and Britain. This is because he assumed that the policy of appeasement would just go on forever. Germany would have likely befriended the Soviet Union, as if the Soviets joined in a war against Germany, it would have resulted in a two-front war, and we all know how good Germany is at handling wars on two fronts, right? But as I told you already, even if this is the most realistic outcome, it doesn't change world history. So I would have to make the executive decision and say that the Austrian painter wasn't intimidated by the Soviets. This is because he believed that he could destroy them easily. Even if this is not the most realistic scenario, it creates for a really cool video, and most importantly, is different from what happened historically. So, for the sake of this video, Germany proceeds with their invasion of Poland, and soon the whole country would fall. with its entire territory being reorganized. What would happen after that? One alternative is for the Soviet Union to invade Germany early, as they would request access over German Belarus and Ukraine. This could happen before the fall of France during the Phony War. If you're going to claim that this is unrealistic, remember that the other alternative is for Germany to simply keep all these territories, invade the Soviet Union in 1941 and still get defeated the same way. If that were to happen, the Soviet Union may suffer more casualties and be slightly weaker, but in the grand scheme of things, nothing much would change. Maybe East Germany would be smaller in that case, but it doesn't really matter. So again, even if it's a bit unrealistic, I would say that the Soviet Union invades Germany after the fall of Poland. This can be done via an ultimatum, where the Soviet Union would request Eastern Poland. Again, if Germany decides to accept the deal, we're back to square one and would have the same prerequisites for a historical German defeat. I gave you 3 warnings that this video is not realistic, so I'll now tell you what would happen in a potential war between Germany, France, Britain and the Soviet Union. Since the Soviet Union is in the middle of a massive purge, their military capability would be greatly limited. At the same time, the Soviet Union would try to station troops in the Baltics, with a pretext of protecting them against German aggression. This time the Baltics may resist, especially if they think that the Germans are going to be victorious against the Soviets. These countries may join Germany or the Soviet Union, but in the grand scheme of the Eastern Front, I don't think it would matter too much. For the sake of this video, I would say that due to proximity, Lithuania chooses to join Germany's side, and Latvia and Estonia choose to be protected by the Soviet Union. I may be wrong, but again, it doesn't change anything regarding the outcome of the war. Since all of this would happen during the Phony War, which was a period in the Second World War where not a lot of action was happening between the fall of Poland and the fall of France, we can assume that the Germans would focus the majority of their forces against the Soviet Union. France had historically committed to a small invasion of the German Saarland, where the French actually saw some success. They decided to cease their advance and retreat, which was a catastrophic blunder, knowing with the power of hindsight. There is however an increased possibility for the French High Command to decide to attack Germany while they are at war with the Soviet Union. This is because they can see how the Germans cannot fight on 2 fronts, and with the French encountering greater resistance prior to their invasion of the Saarland, could result in a quick French victory. On the other hand, let us not forget that France had spent a substantial amount of their budget on the Maginot Line, which was a line of defensive fortifications along the German border. France didn't want to leave these fortifications and expose themselves, so the French mentality was not one of offense. Most likely, the French would just sit idle on the front lines, despite the fact that if they started an offensive, they would crush Germany. This was already seen in Poland historically, where Germany committed about 80% of their army to fight against Poland, and France didn't dare to attack the Germans. This may be a repeat of that, but instead of Poland, Germany would be fighting the Soviet Union. In this scenario, France would just sit idle on the front lines, and this would result in a nightmare for the Soviet Union. The early war was already bad enough for the Soviet Union historically, and this time the war would start around a year and a half earlier. It is true that Germany is yet to do Operation Weserübung and the Schlieffen Plan, resulting in the fall of France and the entry of Italy into the war, so Germany is not that strong. On the other hand, the Soviet Union is just weaker than ever, and Stalin's paranoia is only driving the country to ruins. The fall of France may be delayed, or it may never even happen. Out of ideological reasons, the German Chancellor believed that the war against the Soviet Union is going to be a quick one. He also didn't expect France to fall so quickly as they did historically. Let me remind you that technically Poland lasted longer than France, despite fighting on 2 fronts. Nobody could have expected France to fall so easily, especially with the Maginot Line on the German border. I think that the German Führer would decide to first capitulate the Soviet Union and then focus his forces against France. This is because he would want to avoid war on 2 fronts, and the Soviet Union would seem like the easier target. While this is absolutely not true, let me remind you that the German ruling party really thought that the war is going to take only a couple of months. Historically, Germany attacked the Soviet Union in summer and thought that they would be finished before winter, hence why the troops were poorly equipped for the cold. This I think would be a great mistake of the German Führer, who I think would have performed a lot better in this war, had he re-evaluated his priorities. As a result, I don't think that Italy would be looking to formally declare war on the Allies, and even if they do, they would just sit on their front lines and lose their colonies in Africa. Hungary, Bulgaria and Romania can also join the alliance, with Yugoslavia being invaded as they were historically, and Italy would occupy Albania and declare war on Greece. I think that all of these events would still happen, as the allies cannot prevent them, and the Germans would soon realize that they need some allies. This is because Germany would send a lot of troops into the Soviet Union, which would be successful, but the Soviet army would just do scorched tactics. This means that all the infrastructure would be just blown up by the retreating communists, so the Germans wouldn't capture anything of value. Let us say that the front lines would look like this in early July 1941. Historically, by that time the French had already fallen, but this time it's different. The Japanese are also 5 months away from striking Pearl Harbor and bringing the United States into the conflict. But wait, Japan might not do that in this timeline. The only reason why Japan invaded the United States is because the US put an embargo over Japan. This means that the Japanese couldn't trade for their vital resources, and in the long term they would lose their war in China. Japan was embargoed because they seized French Indochina, which was controlled by the Vichy government, a German puppet state after the fall of France. This time, however, France wouldn't fall, so the Japanese cannot seize French Indochina and get embargoed. The Sino-Japanese conflict is unlikely to include any other countries anytime soon. Going back to Europe, the fall of France may never come. This is because Germany already spent a lot of time and resources fighting in the Soviet Union, believing that they are the easier target. Germany attacking France first is out of character for the ruling German party and ideology. This is because they wanted to destroy communism at all costs, hence why I think such an invasion against France wouldn't come anytime soon. The French would also expand the Maginot Line into Belgium and Luxembourg, which would enrage the German Führer, but there is nothing he can do. At some point, however, the Germans would see that they have spent a lot of time fighting in Russia, and the communists are still far away from capitulating. This would make the Germans want to hold defensible positions and turn their armies against France. All of the Benelux would be invaded, together with Denmark, just for the sake of it. This time the Allies would have a lot more time to prepare for this offensive, so there is no way that France would perform so poorly. Germany would never see the success which they had enjoyed historically, as they relied on speed and surprise offensive, neither of which they can do 2 years into the conflict. However, if France decided to launch an offensive into Germany proper while the Germans are busy against the Soviet Union, it can collapse the German defenses, resulting in a rushed retreat. This would give a lot of French gains, so the French army is unlikely to stop anytime soon. Either way, on how this is achieved, I would predict that the German army is going to get defeated by the Allies, without the United States joining the conflict. In this hypothetical peace treaty, France would directly annex the Saarland and create a state on the Rhine River, which would join the French sphere of influence, together with the Benelux. The United Kingdom is likely to keep the Italian monarchy, but maybe oust Victor Emmanuel III and replace him with a British nobleman or arrange a royal wedding. This would effectively make Italy join Britain's sphere of influence. Poland will be completely saved by the Allies, with the Polish government in exile returning. They would annex Lithuania and be granted some German territory. As for Germany, considering that the Soviet Union was on the losing side, their say in the peace treaty would be largely ignored by the Allies. This means that Germany would get split into Protestant North and Catholic South, including Austria. France and Britain would know that even if the communists in Russia get upset that they are not included and decide to declare war, that the Allies can still beat them. As a result, the Soviet Union would only keep Bessarabia from Romania, Latvia and Estonia. Finally, Czechoslovakia and Yugoslavia would get completely restored. This scenario didn't result in a German victory in the Second World War, but would they win had Yugoslavia remained in the Axis, resulting in Operation Barbarossa to happen sooner and Stalingrad to fall. Check this video to find out. Thank you for watching and I hope to see you there.